I'd like the panel now to turn their focus to whether or not there'll be any limits on recreational consumption. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Sister Kate. We'll go ahead and let you start today.
I would say that if you want to reach the limits of consumption, you ask the teenage boys. Because from my experience, they can smoke their body wheat and weed. I've heard a lot of scary things from the no people that they're regulating THC. I agree there are things in here that they leave to be open, but I think one of the more experts should answer that, because I didn't see anything about limits on potency of THC in anything I read in Prop 64.
There are limits on things like edibles, on how strong they can be, and a few other things in there like that, but which really is pretty arbitrary and kind of ridiculous. But the concern a lot of people have is the driving under the influence language in there, and that's a really, really tricky subject, especially when you look at medical patients. So, you know, you have a medical patient, something like MS or even PTSD, some of those people really need to smoke weed before they drive. Other people, if they did the same dosage that those people did, would be unsafe behind a car. So you have a really, really tough subject to deal with. And AUMA doesn't do the worst job of handling it. They set it up to be done by a study, but we really have no guarantee on how that study is going to come out. And really, you've got another situation where people who don't necessarily understand what they're doing are going to make the rules for us. So it's yet to be seen.
As far as anything else, as far as consumption limits go, I would point out that there's a limit on being able to consume publicly. Like, I can't go to a festival, like a beer brew festival. I can't go to a lounge like I would go to a bar. Under Prop 64, there's the ability to create public social use licensing so that you could have a pot lounge. You could have a special, you know, outside in the park kind of cannabis-related thing. So that, to me, is removing some of the limitations that exist on it.
Speaking of limits, no vaping in public. You're unable to drive for numerous reasons, and you're a passenger in a car. Want to hear about limit? How about not able to medicate in your own car? There's a limit for you. Ask yourself why it was 1 ounce. Who benefits from 1 ounce? So you have to go to a dispensary that's either a monopoly or an oligopoly. You're forced to spend, like Sean said, up to $70 for an eighth. So they don't want you growing more than your 6 plants, and they want you to grow it indoors. And think about what that's going to do to the power grid. 1% of the entire United States energy is consumed by indoor marijuana growing. And if it's forced to go indoors because it has to be attached to a structure and there's all these limitations and you can only do 6, what is that going to do to our power grid? What's that going to do to our economy when things shut down and we have blowouts? Think about that. What if you live in an apartment? What if you're homeless? What if you live in your car like I've had to live in my car before? What if you going through a divorce, or you have CPS in your life? Where are you going to grow it? You don't want that burden. There's nothing in this bill that's either a real negative or a real positive for CPS. Why not? Think about the amount of payoffs that were given it, and lobby group, tip of the hat, all those things that go down in the building behind me. This is a giveaway to Big Pot. This is an offense to Dennis Perrone. This is an offense to Steve Cubby. This is an offense to Ed Rosenthal. This would be an offense to Jack Herrera. Think about it. Sean Parker, the same person who invented Napster and took away people's intellectual property for their musician, their workmanship. Think what he did at Big Sur when he trashed my hometown of Monterey County and was fined by $2 million by the California Coastal Commission because he didn't clean up his trash. Are those the values? And where is Sean Parker today? Where has Sean Parker been any other time? I see people on the right waving their signs, their AstroTurf signs. You go to any event at AUMA, it's like an infomercial. They shut down dissent. I get banned from the Sheraton. Letitia gets arrested. We're called stoners against legalization. I take offense to that. Paid my dues. I've seen people suffer. I started with ACT UP in San Francisco.
Thank you, Kevin.
No, hold on a second. Let me get one more. Give me 30 seconds.
Okay.
just want you to think about who is against this and who is for this. I know we're all tired. I understand the yes side. Every single time you hear somebody say about, well, it's not a perfect bill. Well, let's make it a perfect bill. This is California. We started this. Let's make it a perfect bill. We had a perfect bill with CCHI. We had even, in my opinion, a better bill with MCLR. You know who wrote MCLR? That guy right there. Don't listen to me. Listen to Dave Hodges. Listen to Dennis Perrone. I can't say that name loud enough. Dennis Perrone is against 64. Ed Rosenthal against 64.
Okay, let me just make a clear statement that no one today has a right to grow, to consume, to share, to give away, to drive around with marijuana. And I'm not saying I like it, but the Supreme Court of California has made it abundantly clear. And any city and county can absolutely, totally ban anybody's right to grow, to be a cooperative, to be a dispensary, okay? So let me just make sure that's clear. You have no rights other than to defend yourself after you've been arrested. Now, I used to work in an emergency room, and I've been there when people rolled in after consuming heroin, and it was a big deal. When someone rolled in after eating too many pot brownies, we walked out of the room and laughed. Okay, you're not gonna die. But this bill is not necessarily written for those of us who have been inside the movement. It's written for soccer moms, and I'm telling you, I disagree that they're all stoners, okay? The average soccer mom, and I'm telling you, I've been out there talking to Republicans, Democrats, other groups, and they're not all red-eyed stoners. And they're the ones that are the majority of the voters in the state. So there had to be some compromises made. One of them was these concerns coming out that people are eating a 1,000-milligram cookie and sleeping for 3 days, and they go to poison control and all that stuff. So, okay, there's a limit of 10 milligrams per serving. You can have multiple servings in a candy bar, whatever like that, but the individual serving's 10 milligrams. Now, Russ, if you need 1,000 milligrams, you got to eat 10 little pieces of chocolate. It may get your butt a little fatter, but you'll get to your dose. I don't particularly like that you can't vape in public. That was one of the things about this that bothered me. The science for vaping is very good, and I think you should be able to do that out there in public. But the people that are the average voters don't want this out in the public, okay? And I don't like that, but they're the ones that are going to vote this up or vote this down. So they don't want this out in public. There are ways to be able to go into a private place and consume, but out in public they don't want that. If you're out smoking in a place where you're not supposed to smoke tobacco, the fine actually goes up. It's one of the only instances there where the fine goes up to $250 from $100. Now, there are limits of 1 ounce that you can drive around with. So if you go to a dispensary and they're foolish enough to sell you a pound, how do you get it home without violating the law? So there's going to probably be limits of that. 8 grams of concentrates. But 8 grams of concentrate is 8,000 milligrams of THC. Okay, so if you take a cookie with 100 milligrams, start doing the math, you get to have a lot of cookies, okay, or candy bars or whatever. It isn't like this is just, nobody gets to do this. And another thing that keeps getting thrown in here is apples and oranges. Prop 215 is protected. It doesn't give you a lot of rights, but it's protected. SB 420 is going away, okay? And you think the cops aren't salivating to get after you for having a collective co-op? I'm telling you, at the end of 2018, you don't have any defenses. They're going to start arresting you because they're pissed off they can't get a conviction right now, okay? That's going to happen. That's not about 64. Okay, that's about what's coming from McCursa.
The only really issue we have with the consumption side, well, we have a couple issues, but the big one, I don't even care about edible limits. That's fine. Smoking outdoors and the vaping. We, our brother Louis, you there? Our Stockton chapter head, he goes out and gave joints and vape pens to the homeless. Okay, and these are homeless veterans and who have nothing, and we go out and do it. It's in Stockton. The police are looking at me. It's all legal. And you know, the last thing we need to do is just give another reason to somebody to harass the homeless or the homeless vets. And so, you know, that seems a little ridiculous to me, but at the end of the day, this is the least of our issues. I think it's important to touch on 2 things. First of all, I love when Russ talks. It's like a pharmaceutical commercial. You know, disclosure 15. Well, if you have less than an ounce, this. If you have more than 2 cookies, this. And that's part of the problem. I mean, the fantasy land these guys are living in, MRSA and AUMA, over 200 pages of laws and regulations and rules and regulations. Does common sense tell you that you give the government 200 pages of laws and regulations and less people get in trouble? No. People with money will not get in trouble. People without money will get in trouble. That is the America way. That is what we're about. And this is going to accelerate the war on the poor. Let me tell you one last thing on the donation side someone brought up. There's straight out regulations and laws, and then there's a law of unintended consequences, and we haven't talked about that. But listen, a personal example for us is we get donations from our growers, our farmers, our extract artists free of charge. They give us a percentage. They'll give us 10%. You know, somebody like Loompa Farms, 200 pounds, they throw 10 pounds to us to give away to veterans. They have the lowest marginal cost for that opportunity cost for that donation. It doesn't cost them anything. It costs them what they would have sold it for, $1,500. Now they can no longer do this under this bill. They have to sell to the middleman, have to pay the taxes. The middleman has to wrap it in child-proof safety, has to test it, has to give it to the dispensary. And now we can go to the dispensary and ask them to give us the donations. The stopgap measure that the We for Warriors has been working under, which is giving hundreds of thousands of dollars of medicine each month to veterans throughout this state who can't afford it, is now gone. Not because it says the We for Warriors can't get donations, it's because they, through their regulations, they snuff it out through just laws of economics. People, we can do better. He says in 2018, SB 420 is going away. Great, 2018, let's pass CCHI. Let's pass the We for Warriors bill. Let's pass something in 2018 that's a better bill than this.
Will someone with a prior conviction, we're talking about felonies, be able to get a license to grow or participate in the AUMA marijuana industry? And please cite where this is in AUMA.
I believe in the Prop 64 there are some restrictions on licensing for some people that have been convicted of violent felonies or sexual felonies, but from what I understand, it will still allow the licensing of some people that have previously been involved in the unregulated marijuana market. So that's my knowledge on that. So I did want to rebut a couple of things if I've got a tiny bit of time here. Somebody had mentioned the DUI provisions. You know, Washington State is just north of me in Oregon, and they came up with the most idiotic DUID provision of 5 nanogram per se DUID. If you got 5 nanograms of active THC in your blood, you're automatically guilty, whether you're driving fine or not. Fortunately, every other state that's tried to legalize or has legalized since then, the 5 that are voting now, including California, and the 2 that passed in 2014, Oregon and Alaska, didn't include that DUID provision. Now, there's some fear-mongering going here because Prop 64 says, oh, the California Highway Patrol is going to get this money to study it, study impairment, study how we can figure this out, study what a scientific standard would be. And that doesn't frighten me at all because when they do the real science on this, they'll find out there is no magic number. Marijuana is not alcohol. The body processes it completely different. So if they have to spend money to find out that they can't come up with a breathalyzer, I'm all for that because we get that definitive answer from the state of California. That's going to affect all the other states moving forward that try to legalize.
Like Russ said, it really depends. It depends on if it was a violent felony or not. If it was just a marijuana conviction, I think they're fine. But you know, the biggest problem is who's actually going to be able to be in this industry because of how many available jobs there will be. There's not going to be a lot. We're looking at something that is going to reduce what we currently have in California in the range of 95%. So we're going to drop down to 5% of the dispensaries we currently have. And those are the only ones currently in California that have licenses because, believe it or not, 95% of the California market currently is unregulated. So what will felons be able to participate? I think it's who will actually be able to participate, and it's a much smaller group than people think. And any reason to cut somebody out, like they have a prior felony, that would still be left up to the person doing the hiring. So that's a very difficult question to give a clear answer to, but I think the answer is maybe.
Business and Professions Code Section 26057 and 26059 cover this subject. Under MCURSA, which is what they refer to for their requirements for fingerprinting and a background check, if you have a felony and it involves a substance felony, you can be denied a license. 26059 says that cannot be the only reason to deny a license if it is a marijuana felony. Okay? So there is some room for people who have been prosecuted in the past in the war on marijuana to be able to go in and substantiate that, hey, this was what happened, I was targeted, whatever, I've served my time, I'm out of this, it was a marijuana felony, and as long as there are no public safety issues, and this is another thing, well, no matter what happens, lawyers are going to make a lot of money off of this because you're going to be arguing in front of the judge, was it public safety or not? But if it doesn't involve public safety, you should be able to go through. Now, I sat through some meetings here that are going forward right now under Consumer Affairs, where they're setting up regulations right now. Governor Brown told the licensing people, we do not want people, and especially people of color, to be excluded because they have a marijuana felony in their background. But that's not what McCursa says. In 64, it specifically says that's not a reason to deny all by itself. Does that mean they won't? No. I'm up slinging in these counties and cities around here, and when you talk to these local policymakers, they're making it very difficult. Calaveras County has asked, their sheriff is weeding people out after they took $3.5 million from people for application fees and asking questions like, have you ever used a controlled substance? You ever been arrested at all? You're going for somebody who's not going to get a license, things like that. So if you don't get under McCursa your local permit, you can't even apply for a state license. Under 64, you can get a state license without getting a permit, but you've got to comply with all the local permit regulations before you can actively begin to get into the industry under 64. So even if 64 says you can or cannot, when you get up to these local jurisdictions, it's a horse of a different color. And that's where the politics of this is really going to get important, whether this passes or not. We have to be at local jurisdictions where we're arguing with policymakers, hey, don't make this so difficult for the little guy that they can't get permitted to go on to get a license.
I don't know if they will be or not, but I'll tell you they certainly should be. This is our best and our brightest. These people with convictions dating back to the 1960s are the people that pioneered CBD research, sustainable growing techniques, watershed improvement. We have now 4th, 5th generation growers, like a friend of mine, Hezekiah Allen, who had the courage, I'll say it again, the courage to have his seminal group, California Growers Association, remain neutral. Hear what I said. And he had the courage to remain neutral. It's not his job. It's not the CGA's job to be partisan. They're the California Growers Association, but you can read between the lines, and you can tell by his body language, and I think Hezekiah even came out and said he's pretty much opposed to it. Someone mentioned on the other side that this is going to protect small farmers. Then why did the Small Farmers Association come out against Prop 64? Why has every group from CCHI, Coaster Dam, to the majority of the thinking people in our movement feel that this is not the time? We're in no rush. And where I break from some of the people on my own dais is I actually supported MRSA. That's right. Pro-MRSA, anti-AUMA. If you listen to Jamie Kerr, Planning Commissioner, Shasta County, owner of the 530 Collective, listen to her. Again, don't listen to me. Listen to her. Tell her how confusing. Listen to her words, how confusing it's going to be if they layer AUMA on top of MRSA. We had collaboration from the highest to the lowest parts. We had input from stakeholders. And we crafted a bill to keep it medical. And that's what I never understood, is all the anti-AUMA people who were anti-MRSA. Think about it. MRSA strengthened medical. It allowed people to tear up, like Kitty and I have done in Monterey County. We just applied for a mutual benefit license. That's happening because of MRSA. And the values that come with the Coaster Dam and the values that come with one of those tiered licenses are going to mean jobs for people in Monterey County. Free medicine, no charge of vets, AIDS are 4.0. You got AIDS, it's free. You served our country like Sean, free. Get AUMA, it is going to kill medical. I mean, they can't tax medical, they want to tax rec. That's why they're killing medical.
Yes, I believe they will, but they can't have violent crimes or other stuff polluting their marijuana. It's just specifically they're trying to get people, they're giving the courts authorization in here to go back and look at these cases where growers got jacked up by the law, and if they're still jacked up, they're giving the courts authorization to go, okay, we can drop all this. If it's not illegal tomorrow and you're still fighting something from 2 years ago, the courts have the authority in this proposition to just make that drop in compliance with what's going on now after this becomes law. So they're making an attempt. I think it's very difficult, it's very weak, because most people who got jacked up by the law for growing ended up being jacked up over other things, because that's what our cops do. They'll just go in and find something, anything, make up stuff, plant coke, crap on the sofa. We've all seen it. We all know what happens. So I don't think it's very much, and I don't think it's going to go very far. I just want to say, though, in rebuttal to the other table, I too think CCLR was better. I too think MCLR are better. I gave all my money to those. I supported those. They lost. So the question now is, how many for the next 4 years? I think the no people are okay that for the next 4 years, we continue to put our young people in jail for having a joint, because that's what's going to happen. Maybe it'll be 2 years, but it might be 4 years. We're not okay with that. Any steps in Prop 64 that disempower the police, we have to take those steps. And then I will be fighting right next to you guys to reform AUMA and MMRSA.
I hope so. I'm a felon. In 2015, I got arrested for marijuana possession and giving it away. So I would hope so, but the reality is it's going to be who you are. We know how this works in the political system. Who are you connected to? I can tell you, Alice Huffman, this is one of the things NAACP demanded from Jerry Brown, to not hold felonies against the inner city kids. So basically, we've been arresting black kids, forever, and at a high rate of marijuana convictions, and now rich white people are going to get, rich off dealing. And that was, what she said, and it's been said by a couple people. And so this Jerry Brown threw in there that it can't be held against them solely. And his sister said, if you have violent convictions or something, that's different.